All right, so welcome everyone to the final Thrive webinar today, the fifth of our series. And this one is on love and softening, healing from the emotional inhibition schema. And I saved this one for last because it's crucial, I believe, this healing pathway of love and softening and addressing any emotional inhibition schemas or patterns that we may have developed in the past that block us from revealing how we truly feel in our intimate relationships. So this one is particularly important for those of us who want to develop and cultivate a long-term relationship with one particular person, with one special person. And our intention is to develop a deeper connection with that one person, ideally, because we've invested our whole hearts into this unique connection that we have with our chosen mate. This is such important work, and I'm so happy that you've all joined me on this journey. Because the healing work that we are doing in Thrive is having a benefit for us personally. So it's good for us. We get to experience more positive emotions as a result. It benefits any partners that we choose to invest our hearts in as well. So they get to benefit from the work that we've done here in Thrive. And then for those of us who are therapists, which is, I think, almost 100% of the women doing Thrive, is that our clients, our female clients, but also our male clients will benefit deeply from this work, this understanding of what can be going on at a deeper level for individuals in a relationship that sort of goes beyond what you might normally see in typical couples therapy approaches, which can sometimes be too heavily focused on rational thinking and logic, which is fine for the masculine partner, but the feminine partner may be left feeling unseen when we don't get into these much deeper emotion focused issues, such as, how we feel at a deeper level, what our longings are. So it's been such a joy for me to develop this webinar series and present it to you with the hope that it will really have sparked something in you and you'll be able to continue this work. Okay, so as I like to start with an imagery, to really tap into what we are working through today. So to do that, I invite everyone to close their eyes, and I will also close my own eyes as I guide you through this imagery with the goal of seeing what it brings up for you. All right, so I invite everyone to close their eyes and take a few breaths in and out. And bring into your mind a situation in a relationship with a partner, whether you're in a relationship now or if it's a relationship in your future. And imagine that there has been some kind of event where your partner has done something and it's hurt you. Your partner has maybe done something where they weren't considerate of you and your feelings. And perhaps they acted in a way that felt like they didn't care about you. So take a moment to drop into your heart and become aware of this feeling of pain and hurt. And just breathe through this. Emotional pain is one of the most distressing experiences that we can go through. So just be tender with your heart as you notice this pain and hurt and anger that you're feeling. And just take your time to acknowledge this pain, not trying to run away from it, not trying to bury it, and not trying to explain your way out of it. Now, as you sit there across from your partner with all of this pain and hurt in your heart, I want you to now reveal to your partner how much pain you're in, how hurt you are. You might say, I'm so upset by what happened. I feel so hurt. You might say, I feel angry, but also underneath that, I feel so hurt. And just notice what's going on for you right now as you reveal this deeper pain to your partner. Just notice if there is any feelings of fear and anxiety about whether it feels unsafe to reveal such deep, painful, vulnerable emotions. Or for some of you, you may notice that the feeling is one of shame, feeling shameful about being someone who is so deeply affected. And if you are noticing feelings of fear and shame as you reveal how you feel to your partner, see if you can just expand your capacity to sit with those feelings of fear and shame and keep revealing how you feel anyway. Knowing that you're stepping into uncharted territory. For some of you, this feels very risky. For some of you, this feels very unsafe. For some of you, the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen in the next moment, how this is all going to be received by your partner. The uncertainty of that is almost too much to bear. So to carry you through this, you dig deep and you rely on this source within you to hold space for your true emotions and to get that reassurance that you're going to be okay on the other side of this, no matter what. And from that place of inner clarity, continue to reveal how you feel to your partner and notice what happens. How are they receiving you? And how do things change when you are grounded in your own truth and able to hold space for all of these intense emotions? So just pause here for a moment, noticing everything that's coming up. And just note this inner experience as something that you can come back to and explore again and again, so that you can start to understand more and more about yourself and any feelings of fear and shame that are attached to revealing how you truly feel to a partner, which includes revealing when you feel hurt and angry. So I invite you to bring your attention back into your body, back into the present moment. You can wriggle your fingers, wriggle your toes, and you can slowly open your eyes. Okay. Lovely. Hope you've got some insights from going through that imagery right now. That would be the kind of imagery that we might want to do on ourselves or on anyone who's in a relationship where there are fears about emotional expression and showing how we feel. This is so important, because to be honest about how we feel, all of our emotions, is a source of energy for the relationship. And that's what today's webinar is all about, to really understand some of the impacts of being disconnected from our emotions, from our heart, and also the healing pathways out of those old habits, old patterns and schemas towards more spontaneous emotional expression. Okay, so here's this lovely, lovely poem by Rumi, or quote by Rumi. I don't know if he was 14th or 15th century Persian poet. Anyway, it was a long time ago that he was talking about love and all of this wisdom, and we still struggle with it. So here he says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So he's talking about us kind of going inwards and understanding our own blocks to giving and receiving love, and what might be still present or unprocessed within ourselves, what wounds might need healing, so that we can fully show up in our intimate relationships and express love via expressing all of how we feel. So not just the rainbows and unicorns that we're going to be talking about today. It's all the messy stuff as well. And you can't get to the good stuff by avoiding all of the mess and the chaos and the pain as well that comes with long-term partnership. So to do that, we are going to focus on the emotional inhibition schema. And, schema therapy has so much to offer as a structure and a model when it comes to healing deep wounds. And that includes helping women to connect to their deeper truth and cultivate the healthy relationships that they dream of having. So the definition of the emotional inhibition schema by Jeff Young is the excessive inhibition of spontaneous action, feeling, or communication, usually to avoid disapproval by others, feelings of shame, or losing control of one's impulses. The most common areas of inhibition involve inhibition of anger and aggression, inhibition of positive impulses, for example, joy, affection, sexual excitement, play, difficulty expressing vulnerability or communicating freely about one's feelings, needs, etc., or excessive emphasis on rationality while disregarding emotions. So even just reading the definition of this schema is really useful because it helps us to understand that there's a block, that there's potential negative consequences to this schema. And also it starts to really tap into the broader cultural messages, the culture that we grew up in, and what messages we received from our cultural editors about expressing emotions and vulnerability. And gender-based messages. I mean, there's negative messages for both men and women, I believe, when it comes to emotional expression. For men, it may be, boys don't cry and it's a sign of weakness. And for women, it might be you're too much or you're crazy. Or we might have gotten both messages. Either way, it's something for us to heal from so that we can bring more love and softening into our intimate relationships. Okay, so let's have a look at the origins of the emotional inhibition schema so that we can have a good sense of how it develops and we can spot the timeline that it follows, and we can at least have a rational understanding of where this pattern comes from. I don't know about you guys, but being a psychologist, I like to know why things are so. I need to know I need to analyze it. I need to understand it at a cognitive level before I can sort of, go and process it at a deeper emotional level. And I'm sure a lot of you here resonate with that. All of us have gotten into a profession that involves understanding things at a rational level. Okay, so the origins of the emotional inhibition schema can include where in the family of origin, so in our early childhood environment, there may have been negative messages about showing emotions. So say if someone was crying or upset, someone else in the family might have mocked or ridiculed that person and teased them, laughed at them. And if that mocking behavior wasn't addressed, then the person that was upset will get the message that I'm going to get mocked and teased anytime I get upset and reveal emotions. So the first thing that we want to consider is, what messages did people receive in the early environment about showing deeper feelings of pain and vulnerability? Was it taken seriously? Was there tenderness? Was that person given compassion and understanding, or were emotions seen as something to be embarrassed by or something to hide? Also, this emotional inhibition schema can develop just through modeling. So if there was one or both parents who modeled emotional inhibition, where they didn't express much emotion, didn't express much warmth or affection, didn't express anger in a vulnerable way, didn't express ever that they were hurt by someone's actions, then it's sort of role modeling to the child how we deal with emotions. So this is another, very common pathway where this schema can develop. Another pathway, which is kind of the opposite of the modeling emotional inhibition, is when one, say, parent or caregiver had extremely high levels of expressed emotion that were quite chaotic, traumatic, or unsafe for the people around them, especially a child who kind of is reliant on that parent or caregiver for love, support, and nurturance. But if one of the parents or caregivers was quite dysregulated in their emotional expression, then a child can learn that, this idea that any emotional expression is unsafe, because it sort of leads you to become, to lose control. It feels very out of control. And I did work with a woman once who suffered from anorexia, and she had a mother who had bipolar and poor emotion regulation, and a father who was very logical and rational. And she can recall making a decision in her early childhood that she never wanted to be like her mother, and she felt more safe with her father. So she become overly rational and disconnected from any kind of vulnerability, any kind of emotions bubbling up to the surface, because that felt too chaotic. So that's another pathway where this can develop. Another is just, plain old personality and temperament. Some of us are just born with more of a preference towards order and logic, a bit more left-brained, and just less comfortable with the chaos of emotions. And that can be, temperament as well as environment, or a bit of both. Okay, so then let's take a look at the consequences of this schema, of this emotional inhibition schema. What happens if we don't address it? What happens if it is left to its own devices and it just plays out in our intimate relationships? What can happen over time? So when emotions are less on the surface, and can be seen and more buried under many layers, the way we express our core needs in the relationship can become prickly or rigid, because it's almost like it hasn't got the life force behind it. When our emotions are expressed more spontaneously, it has a lot of life force behind it, because it's directly connected to how we feel in our hearts right now. It's true in this moment. Okay, so that it's not stale. It hasn't congealed, if that makes sense. But when we suppress emotions and they're buried under multiple layers, it sort of loses some of that life force. And then it can come out in more prickly or rigid or harsh ways, that because it's also been filtered through, thousands and thousands of negative thoughts that have, attempted to process the pain. So it's all sort of caught up in negative assumptions and judgments about our partner or about the future of the relationship, and it's not clean. So on the receiving end of that, it can feel quite threatening as well, to be on the receiving end of a more harsh delivery of emotions and needs. Another consequence is it feels too unsafe to be honest about our true emotions. So we may start using passive aggressive techniques to express how we feel, or we can become scolding and harsh, or even disempowered and helpless. So scolding and harsh would be when we sound like a strict school principal. Is the best way to describe it. You know, those strict school principals back in the 80s. Maybe they still exist. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in school. But that real, you know, that finger pointing and that harsh tone, you know, who do you think you are, or how dare you, or using contempt in the delivery. You know, that's how it can end up coming across when we're not doing it in a more spontaneous way. Also, if we're not expressing in a spontaneous way, or some of us can lean towards that more harshness and scolding, and some can lean to the other end, which is more helpless and disempowered, and we can maybe sound quite childlike when we're saying, you know, you don't care about me, and this isn't fair, and we feel like we're back in childhood in our relationship with a partner. So there's some of the consequences that can occur if we don't address this emotional inhibition and find more regular ways to express how we're feeling as we go along day to day. Another consequence of emotional inhibition is that we may use distraction techniques to avoid any kind of emotional intimacy or any kind of revealing how we feel, which basically is unavoidable when you're up close with someone. You know, if you're spending time with someone, talking to them daily, it's very hard to avoid emotions coming up and being part of that conversation. So we could use activities such as work, exercise, socializing with friends or our devices, alcohol, you know, partying, shopping, all sorts of activities to numb ourselves from how we're really feeling and the pain that we're feeling in our relationship. But this is not a solution. These distraction techniques are not a solution. They're okay in the short term, you know, to sort of help regulate very intense emotions that might have come up until we feel a bit more grounded and we can go back to a partner and talk about how we're feeling. But they're not good long-term solutions or even medium-term solutions, because they start to create a wall and distance, and it's going to become harder and harder to establish that closeness again the longer we spend disconnected in our relationships. Okay, so that's all a little bit grim, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit grim talking about these negative schemas that developed in our childhoods. But it's also very empowering because we can see the timeline where these habits formed, and we can pinpoint it and go, oh, right, okay, of course I inhibit how I feel because that's what my parents did and that's how they showed me that's how you do relationships. Or it was never safe to reveal how I feel, or, you know, I would get mocked or ridiculed. So it's really empowering to understand the things that may have gone on in the past that led to us developing these habits in our present. But what's most important is that we have a pathway forward as well. Okay, so now let's get into the more positive energy of this webinar. So let's talk about love and emotional expression. So a thriving relationship usually involves at least one partner who is willing to express the emotions felt in the relationship so that each can learn about one another at a deeper level. Now, in some perfect, ideal conscious relationship, maybe you had both people who've gone away as single people and done all of this amazing work, you know, and then miraculously have met each other and they've already done all of this healing work and they come together and they're both got their finger on the pulse when it comes to the emotions felt in the relationship. I'm sure that happens in the spiritual community where there's, these people doing deep inner work. In the circles that I move in, it doesn't really look like that. Certainly in my own relationship, I am the person with more the finger on the pulse when it comes to feeling the emotions felt in the relationship and bringing that to the relationship table, making that a priority, understanding at a deep level that all of this needs to be on the table and expressed and revealed. And that's one of the priorities for me in the relationship, above matters, more practical matters like finances and work and day-to-day decisions. Okay, so if you identify as a person in your relationships who tends to be the one that's more focused on the feelings felt in the relationship, then I encourage you to celebrate that and to own that and step into a leadership role when it comes to being the more feelings-based partner, or at least the one that is more willing to express feelings. So often one partner is more connected to emotions and connection than the other. And that's okay. That's all coming back to that yin and yang, the balance, both partners bringing something different to the relationship, both bringing their own unique gifts. And emotional expression creates depth in the relationship. And it also creates emotional safety and therefore love. Okay, by practicing this habit, or not, it's not even a habit, this practice, this philosophy of emotional expression influences the other partner as well, because they get to see how comfortable we are with emotional expression and revealing. And over time, and they see also that we don't shame ourselves and that we don't feel like there's anything to be ashamed about, and needing to hide how we feel, then our partners can learn from us. And what a beautiful gift that is, that they are witnessing us revealing how we feel and bringing vulnerability to the table. And then they start to step into that space as well, because they see that it's safe to express emotions. And if it's safe to express all emotions, then of course it's also safe to express love. And love is only one of many emotions that we feel in relationship. Okay, so emotional inhibition means that real and spontaneous feelings get suppressed or buried, but they don't disappear. They're just less conscious. Okay, so these feelings and unmet needs that we have, we may suppress them. It doesn't mean that they're going away. It doesn't mean that they're no longer a problem or an issue. It just means that they're buried and they're going to do something underneath those layers. So when anger is buried, so if we feel spontaneous anger about, say, how our partner spoke to us today or how they forgot something really important, if that gets buried because we're not comfortable with anger, it can develop into resentment and hatred over time, over a long period of time. If enough of that happens, pushing down anger, that can be the result. When anxiety and insecurity gets buried, so if we feel like, oh, we can't express our anxieties, we can't express our insecurities to a partner, we need to hide that aspect of who we are, eventually that can cause detachment or dissociation from our bodies. So we have to start disconnecting from our own deeper needs because if we stayed in it, it would become too distressing, too overwhelming. So we have to start disconnecting from how we feel. And this creates a wall. If we're disconnected from our bodies and we're just sort of in our heads, then we're not connecting heart to heart with our partner. So this can create a wall, and the couple can start to feel like strangers to each other. And then a lack of emotional intimacy can eventually lead to a lack of physical intimacy, which over many years or decades will become painful for both partners if there's that distance, that disconnect. Okay, so we're looking at love as being just one expression that is possible when we express everything about how we feel in our relationship, and we feel free to do so. So let's look at this fear and shame that is underlying the emotional inhibition schema. Okay, so these are the two key emotions that are responsible for the emotional inhibition schema. And in my work as a schema therapist, I believe that it's my job to transmute these emotions in myself and in my clients, these emotions of fear and shame, to kind of alchemize them into something else so that they don't rule over our natural tendency for emotional expression, which is a key ingredient for intimacy and connection. Okay, so if we were raised in ideal, perfect early environments, we would have received the message that all of your emotions are welcome, and emotions are just a natural part of being human, and they're also a really important aspect of relationships, sharing how we feel with one another so that we can learn about each other. But it's these messages that resulted in the feelings of fear and shame about showing how we feel that block us from this more natural tendency, this healthy tendency to say how we feel. How do we transmute fear and shame? So challenging. This is hard work. This is hard work. If it was easier, everyone would have done it by now. Well, how can we do this? For me, it's never been about just changing the way that I think about sharing emotions. It has to happen at a much deeper level. And I've been on a long journey to try and understand this and, you know, shift this permanently, not permanently, so that I'm not back at the same spot every time strong emotions come up in relationships. And I believe that in every woman, there is an inner wise woman, which, if you like the work of Carl Jung, it's an archetypal energy. It's a part of us that's not just unique to our own personality, but it's something shared across all humanity, across all women. So this archetypal energy of this inner wise woman who is there for us, to support us to overcome our fears of rejection and abandonment, and put love as the highest priority. And this inner wise woman, she's so wise that she knows how to soothe, deep feelings of pain and anger and hurt. And she knows how to work with grief. She can make space for grief. She can reassure us that we can get through grief. If it ever comes to that, if revealing how we feel to a partner results in them abandoning us, rejecting us, ending the relationship, this deeper archetypal wise woman will be able to help us through grief. She doesn't want that for us. I don't think. She doesn't want the relationship to end. You know, if our heart is in the relationship, then this inner wise woman also wants the relationship to thrive and flourish. But since we don't have any control over someone else's intentions, someone else's choices or decisions to stay in the relationship and work through difficult times, luckily we have this part within us that will help us to grieve and process the pain that comes with relationships ending. Yeah, so this is something that I do in my coaching work with women, is to help them tap into their inner wise woman. Because once we feel connected to this internal source, we become, I don't want to say fearless, we become more courageous. We become more courageous and more willing to reveal how we truly feel to a partner. We sort of start to trust in the sort of the bigger picture, the idea that emotional expression is a good thing for relationships, even though we've never seen it before. We start to develop some faith in how love works. It's beautiful when you finally connect with your inner wise woman. You know that you can rely on her to carry you through the challenging times of relationships. Just a little bit on the dismissive avoidant attachment style, just to understand, you know, that there is an overlap with the emotional inhibition schema and this very common attachment style, which is found in 25% of people. So it's, you know, a quarter of all people have this attachment style, not uncommon. With this attachment style, the attachment system is inclined more towards independence, self-reliance, and autonomy. So that's what feels safe and comfortable and familiar to someone with an avoidant attachment style. So conflict in intimate relationships can feel really unsafe because it involves a lot of emotions being expressed, which is you know, a kind of an emotional intimacy, a closeness. So conflict can feel unsafe and it can activate this flee or flight response where they want to run away, get away, have space. And someone with this attachment style may feel uncomfortable expressing both positive and negative emotions in the relationship, because expressing any kind of emotions invites intimacy and closeness. And intimacy and closeness typically feels sort of somewhat unsafe or unfamiliar with people with this attachment style. So if this is you, or if this is one of your clients with a dismissive avoidant attachment style, the key skills to master, or the work to be done here, is, well, I've sort of summarized it here. One is verbal communication of your investment in the relationship. Because the sort of the fleeing, the running away, the taking space feels like the opposite of being invested in the relationship. So it's important to balance that with verbally communicating your investment in the relationship. I am committed to us. You know, we're fine, we're okay, I just need space. So that kind of verbal reassurance. And I'd say that would be true whether this person is in a relationship with someone with an anxious attachment style, disorganized attachment style, or even a secure attachment style. But it's important for someone with the avoidant attachment style to verbally communicate their investment. Secondly, the work is to find ways to express appreciation and love for the partner in whatever love language is right. And to make sure that if your love language is different to your partner's love language, to communicate that this is how I show you my love. And thirdly, to communicate the need for space to process difficult emotions. Now, I see nothing wrong with one partner saying to the other, look, when things get really tense between us, I need space. I need to take space. I need to be on my own to process what's going on. It usually takes me X amount of time. Or would you be willing to give me, this much space? And then we'll come back and we'll talk this through and we'll work it out together. Okay, that's creating a nice container of safety for the relationship. Whereas this attachment style and the emotional inhibition schema or behavior pattern can sometimes look the opposite to that, which is looks like the person doesn't care or isn't invested in the relationship, doesn't love the partner, which can create havoc in the stability of the relationship. Okay, so I'm wondering just if there's any questions so far. I'll just check in. Did anyone want to come off mute, ask any questions about this schema so far? Oh, good. Well, at any point you can put a question in the chat box. Okay, so let's press on to some of the methods that we can use to start shifting this. Start shifting out of emotional inhibition and opening up this space for more love and softening. Okay, so one method in schema therapy is using Socratic questioning to unpack the negative pattern. So we could ask these kind of questions to ourselves or to the clients that we work with. We could ask, when did you first learn that showing emotions was unsafe or undesirable? So that question, helps them to sort of place, in time in the past when that all started. Did anyone in the family shame or judge someone who was expressing hurt, anger, or sadness? Did anyone in your early environment model emotional inhibition or a stiff upper lip or being overly rational or unaffected by others? And how about in the broader culture that you grew up in? The school that you went to, the circles that you moved in, and the country that you grew up in, or maybe even your religion. We can ask, was there anyone in the family who was unable to regulate their own emotions, causing you to fear your own emotions coming up? So you can see how these questions really cause us to reflect on, where some of these patterns might have started, and also start to decide whether we want to continue those old messages, those old patterns, or whether we're ready to let go of that and say, well, no, that was more relevant for my parent or caregiver, and it's not how I want to approach relationships. And what messages do you think you received in your past about being vulnerable, opening up, and letting someone in? How about when it comes to showing warmth, affection, and admiration? What messages did you get about that? Some people might just say, well, it just wasn't done. It just wasn't done. So the message then is that it's not encouraged to do that. And then we want to ask, well, how is emotional inhibition having a negative impact on your relationship now? How is suppressing how you truly feel impacting on the way that your relationship is playing out now? Okay, so all of these questions cause us to reflect on some patterns that we may have been unaware of up till now. Great. So another technique that we use in schema therapy is chair dialogues, which is a powerful technique to bring up emotions, to bring up hidden patterns or beliefs that may be lurking underneath the surface of awareness and get some movement. Get some movement, free ourselves, release ourselves from the hold that some of these patterns and modes can have over our lives. All right, so one chair dialogue that I would typically use when there's an emotional inhibition schema with a client, and it would sound very much like the same dialogue that I've had in my own head to deal with my own critic when it comes to shaming of emotions. So that's the beauty of schema therapy, is that we get to apply it in our own lives, and we get to benefit from the healing that comes with this technique, as well as share it with our clients. Win-win. All right, so in this chair dialogue, we've got 3 chairs here. The therapist is sitting in one of the 2 chairs to the left, the client sitting in the one next to the therapist, and the empty chair over there is the chair of the inner critic. Okay, so when it comes to the emotional inhibition schema, generally I think, well, this is safe to get your client to go sit in the chair of the inner critic and embody the inner critic and speak on behalf of the inner critic. It's often not so toxic that we want to avoid having the client embody this part. So I would say, okay, Jane, can I get you to go and sit in the chair over there, and I want you to be your critic. And then we would interview our client whilst they are in the role of critic. And we might ask it about, what are your opinions and judgments about Jane's emotional expression, about Jane revealing how she feels to a partner, about her showing her vulnerable side and letting someone into her inner world of needs and longings and desires. What are your opinions and judgments about her doing that? And usually our client who's sitting in the chair of the critic will be able to speak quite spontaneously from this side. They might say, well, she looks like an idiot, or she looks like a fool, or it's embarrassing for her to show how she feels, or she makes it look like she's weak, or she makes it look like she's needy. If she has needs, then she's needy. So we're drawing out the dialogue of the inner critic and making it very conscious by this technique. Then we can say, well, where did you come from? Whose voice do you represent? And whose wounds are you originally attached to? Other than Jane, are you also attached to someone else's unprocessed wounds from their past? Perhaps a mother or a father or a grandparent. And this is a great question to ask the critic, whose voice do you represent? Because it's very helpful for us, as well as the clients that we work with, to understand that, oh, this is the voice of my mom or my dad or my aunt or grandparent or someone else, or even a coach or a teacher. Okay, so once we've established where this side comes from, then we can start to challenge it, because we've realized that this side doesn't represent us. It doesn't represent our client. It doesn't speak on behalf of us. our higher self. It's speaking on behalf of a wounded part of someone else. So we want to challenge it. So to do the challenging, I mean, there's no right or wrong with chair work, but often at this point, I would maybe invite my client to come sit back next to me and have an empty chair where I get to challenge the critic. But there's no right or wrong. This is just sort of how I do it. So then the client's sitting back next to me, and I would speak to the empty chair, and I would say, it's time for you to stop shaming Jane about how she feels, about expressing how she feels in her relationships. And I want you to stop fear-mongering her and making her afraid to just reveal how she really feels. And I would say, Jane now has the support and the resources to be more courageous and reveal how she feels to a partner without feeling shame or without feeling fear about being seen for who she is. And that challenging alone is very powerful, because you're setting a limit on all the fear mongering and the shame mongering that the critic does behind closed doors. And then I would turn to my client and I'd say to her, what would you like to say to the critic? And that's really great, because usually our clients intuitively know what would be the most powerful statement to make in that moment, that they're going to then go away and practice and say whenever this critic pops up in their inner thoughts. Yeah, so can you see how powerful a technique this is when it comes to starting to heal from the emotional inhibition schema and starting to pave the way for more, love and softness as a more natural mode to be in our intimate relationships. All right. So now we're getting up to the embodiment practices. Okay, so far we've talked about all of the cognitive, rational, understanding and mental understanding of what's going on here. What's really important is that we can start to drop into our bodies and into our hearts and start to find more safety inhabiting our bodies and inhabiting our hearts and relating from this space. Okay, so the embodiment practices that I'm going to talk about on this webinar are 1, dropping into the body and the heart, 2, expressing hurt and anger, 3, softening the repair, and 4, expressing love and warmth. Okay, so dropping into the body and heart. So whenever I would be practicing this on myself, because maybe there's some tension in the relationship, something needs to be expressed, my go-to practice is to go, okay, I need to drop into my body and drop into my heart, because I don't want to rely on my thoughts, on rational logic to work through complex relationship issues. It's never really worked out that well for me, because you just create this debate. You just end up forming this argument in your mind. But whenever you're only in your mind and not in your heart and your body, the ego can just run rife and just take over and build up this story where your partner is like the enemy and they're the baddie and you're the victim, and you've got to fight for your survival. So that's what we want to avoid in this Thrive work is not allowing the ego to take over and run the show, but rather dropping into our heart where our deeper desires for the relationship can be felt. All right, so to do that, you could do this right now. You could just perhaps put your hand over your heart. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. And you could imagine all the energy dropping down from your very busy mind and all of the thousands and thousands of thoughts going through your head, bringing all of that energy down into your body and really get a sense of being in your body. You could even, clench and release certain muscles just to really get a sense of being in your body. And then when you do have a sense of being in your body, you can check in with your heart. And what I like to do is imagine that the heart is like a massive reservoir, so expansive, so much space, and so much capacity to hold many, many complex, intense emotions all at once. And when you have this sense of your heart being like a reservoir with all of this massive space, then you might feel a little bit more free to explore all the different corners, all the different rooms. You can explore where is there some hurt and where is there some pain. You can explore where is there anger and what's the unmet need underneath that anger. What is that anger wanting me to learn about my needs, about what I need? We can also explore where is there grief. Is there grief or sadness that we've not yet processed? And we need to just make some space for the grief that's there. And we can explore where is there feelings of jealousy or insecurity that we may not have had space to explore up until now. And when we've looked at all of those painful emotions, anger, hurt, grief, sadness, insecurity, and we've made space for all of it, then we can move on to exploring some more uplifting emotions. We can start to ask ourselves, what fills me up about this relationship? Where is the joy that I feel in this relationship? What are my hopes and dreams for this relationship? And what are my deeper longings? And in what ways do I feel comfortable expressing love and affection and admiration for a partner. So just observe your own experience right now, what it's like for you to drop into your own heart and realize what an expansive space it is in there. For some of you, it might feel unfamiliar, chaotic to go into this space of emotions, given that emotions can be so chaotic, so unpredictable, so intense. But even though emotions can be chaotic and unpredictable, see if you can create some kind of support structure. This concept of your heart being like a reservoir, that it's not completely without form, that all chaotic processes eventually return to some kind of stability and calm. And then bring your attention back into your body and back into the present moment. And you can slowly open your eyes. Okay, so that is one embodiment practice that I've been practicing myself for many years now, which I find very reassuring and very containing for me, because it means that I don't have to squeeze out the emotions or suppress them or bury them. I can sort of stretch myself into feeling all of it, which makes it feel more safe when it's time for me to express how I feel to my partner. Okay, the second embodiment practice is expressing hurt and anger. And to do that, again, I find it useful to close our eyes and imagine a situation. You don't have to close your eyes right now. You don't want to. But imagine that your partner or a partner is in front of you and they have done something to upset you, and they're not fully aware that you're hurt or angry, but you're aware of feeling hurt and angry. Can you imagine expressing your hurt and anger to a partner, and it's coming straight from your heart? It's nice and clean. It hasn't festered a long time in your thoughts. So there's not a lot of story attached to your hurt and anger right now. It's you feeling it right now. Can you imagine expressing straight from your heart, I feel so hurt. I feel angry about what you just did. Can you stay connected to your heart and to your feelings of love for yourself and honoring yourself? And can you also be connected to the relationship also at the same time? Still having love for a partner, still having love for the relationship, and expressing hurt and anger. This is something to practice over and over again in our own time, feeling into our bodies what it would feel like to express hurt and anger in this more clean way, without all the stories and without the harshness that comes with seeing our partner as doing something intentional. Now, this is not a practice that I would recommend for women if I believe that they are in a relationship with a narcissistic or abusive partner, because this kind of revealing vulnerability to a partner who's narcissistic or abusive is just going to cause more problems and more of a power imbalance, because that kind of a partner will often take that and use that against their partner. So if I'm coaching other women, I like to spend time to try and feel into their partner, based on how my clients are describing their partner to me. It's important to try and get an accurate, it's not possible to get an entirely accurate view because we're only hearing one side of the story, which is why we will just ask lots of questions about, well, how would they react if you said this? And what happens when you prioritize yourself or set a boundary? How do they respond? So really trying to get a sense of whether they're either with a narcissistic abusive partner or a partner who has good intentions for the relationship and might have a dismissive avoidant attachment style, or might have an emotional inhibition schema, which is still something that can be worked through. Okay. All right. Another important embodiment practice is softening the repair. So when there's been a rupture in our relationships, we're going to have to come back together and talk it through. And usually both people's feelings have been hurt and we're feeling misunderstood and we're feeling like we haven't been seen and we've been treated unfairly. So I really like Brené Brown's quote, what's the most generous assumption that you can make about your partner, which is going to soften you when you go back in to do the repair. So if you're needing to repair something, or say if your partner is attempting to repair something with you, they're coming to you, they're saying, hey, can we talk through this? In that moment, we can either become prickly and hostile again and really sort of drive the nail in and remind them of, what they've done wrong, or we can soften. So in order for us to soften our bodies, so we're needing to drop into our bodies and soften. So it feels like we can be penetrated emotionally. It feels like there's not a big wall up blocking our partner getting through. They're wanting to get through. They're wanting to penetrate through the layers and get through to our heart. So in order for us to participate in this repair, we need to soften our bodies. Okay, so just think about what posture does your body need to be in order for you to feel soft and safe for your partner to step forwards and initiate a repair. Okay, so that's one. What posture? What does it feel like to be in your body and to soften your body? And the second part is, where is the strength coming from? We can't just be all soft. Do you know what I mean? Like marshmallow. Because, then we're not going to survive if we're just all mush. We've got to find some kind of structure, some kind of support. So, and that needs to be from the inside. So we need to tap into this inner strength. And I like to call it our inner masculine, this side of us that's strong and warrior-like and says, I got you, Tracy. I'll help. If your softness is taken advantage of and not received well by a partner, I've got you. So that's where our strength needs to come from in moments of repair, because we have to remember that our partners are very defensive also. You know, if there's been a rupture, both people are defensive. Okay, so then we can soften and we can practice softer thoughts like we're just both trying to do the best that we can. Neither of us are very skilled when it comes to conflict resolution. You know, we've both come from environments where conflict was not practiced well. You know, we've got to cut each other some slack. So we can come from a place of compassion for our partners as well as self-compassion. So that's the softening embodiment practice. We want to soften our bodies, soften our posture, tap into our heart, feel like our heart is sort of open to new possibilities, to love, to healing, to repairing, to getting back on track in our relationship. It sort of involves assuming the best, believing in the good in the relationship and not assuming the worst and getting all protective. This is a practice, everyone. This is a lifelong practice for some of us, which is fine. I'm happy to keep doing this work because I see the results. I see the results of all of these embodiment practices that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so softening the repair. And finally, with all of those previous embodiment practices, that starts to create this sort of inner sense of trust. I can trust myself. I can trust how I deal with emotions. I can trust how I navigate complex, difficult emotions. From that place, now it really opens up to expressing love and warmth in the relationship. And that can come in lots of different ways. We can do this in many different ways. And, you know, you could do the 5 love languages questionnaire and find out, you know, what are the ways that you feel most comfortable expressing love and warmth. And when you know what that is, and that's good because you can make that a regular habit, but you can also make sure that your partner understands that this is how you express love to them. So you can share your love language with your partner. Okay, so some of the ways that we can express love and warmth are physical touch. That's my number 1 love language. And, you know, just sort of touching my partner on his arm, I can feel that that is my way of expressing love to him. And I can do that every day. Compliments, giving compliments, pointing out to your partner what you like about them, what's good about them. Also expressing gratitude. So not being afraid to say thank you. You know, I appreciate what you do for me. And I see this as a really good litmus test. You know, if I am shying away from expressing gratitude to my partner, it's a bit of a red flag for me to go, why aren't I feeling generous with showing appreciation and gratitude to my partner? What kind of resentment has been building in me that I might need to address so that I can get back to this place of expressing gratitude and appreciation in a more generous way? Now, you know, relationships go through peaks and troughs and ups and downs. And if we're talking long-term relationship over a 20-year period, there could be, you know, prolonged periods where there's not a lot of gratitude and appreciation expressed. But that's okay. That's okay, because it's just an indication that there's something deeper going on that needs to be worked through. But this can be a good kind of compass point to sort of get us back on track and go, okay, you know, if I'm feeling stingy with my expression of gratitude, it's a warning sign for me personally to go, okay, Where's the resentment building? And then finally, another form of expressing love and warmth, I believe, is sharing your hopes and dreams about the relationship. This is something that I like to do. I'm more of the dreamer in my relationship, and I'll say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if one day we did this? Or I really hope one day we can do this. So sharing my vision of the relationship. My partner's more cautious. He doesn't tend to sort of get too carried away with that kind of stuff, but that's okay because I do plenty of that. And I think that's okay to have one person that might be a little bit more emotionally expressive in the relationship than the other. And then, again, that's part of that yin and yang, part of that balance. Okay, so they're the 4 embodiment practices that I invite each of you to revisit, take a look at, to practice, and to share with any of your clients that may be sort of withholding or suppressing how they feel. Okay, so getting to the end now. So the outcome of all of this important work is that love and softening invites a deeper connection. So the energy of love and softening is in alignment with intimacy and connection. So it facilitates intimacy and connection. And it's the way that we communicate our investment and commitment to the relationship, because by expressing love and softening, it signals safety and togetherness. And it's also the life force that causes a relationship to grow stronger over time. Okay, so all living things need nourishment, like the sun and water for plants. Intimate relationships require this sort of love and softening over time in order for it to grow. Otherwise, the conditions are too harsh and things don't grow too well under harsh conditions. Or some things do, like cactuses, but when it comes to intimate relationships, love and softening is an energy that will certainly contribute to it thriving over time. All right, you lovely ladies, have a wonderful rest of today, and please feel free to reach out if you'd like any more information about my coaching work. And of course, I will send through the recording and the notes in the next 24 hours.